Hey everybody, welcome to Drive-Thru Review 364. Today we're going to talk about American Rails. This is a train game from Quined Games. It came out a couple of years ago, and then I think a couple of years before that it was actually kind of a print and play or a very small production. But now it's been picked up by Quined. Like I said, a couple of years ago it came out, finally getting around to reviewing it. And if you're familiar with Chicago Express is a big one, or German Railways, or other winsome train games, this is very much in that vein. And it is, I don't want to say it's patterned off of Chicago Express, but the map is very similar to Chicago Express. And some of the mechanisms are very similar as well, but there are some tweaks and riffs on them. And there are some definitely significant differences between the two. So let's jump in and take a look at how it works, and I'll come back and tell you what I think. Okay, here we can see all of the components that come with the game. You've got your board here. You've got areas for the different train companies. You've got stock in the different colors. You've got these cubes here, which are going to signify railways that you're going to be placing out on the different hexes out on the board. Each player is going to get a little train marker in their color, and then they'll also get a player aid card here. And you can see these are different folks here and different colors. It doesn't really matter what they are, they just kind of signify which color you are. On the back side of these, it's going to show you the three ways that the game will end. If we get to 1857, or the last round of the game, if we have auctioned off all of the shares of stock, and depending on the player count, if we have depleted different sets of markers, so if we run out of 3 sets of development or rail markers in a 3-player game, then that will trigger the last round, whereas a 5-player game will need 5 sets. Depending on the number of players will start out with a different amount of money. You can see it's nice fancy paper money here. It's actually not too bad. It's not the worst, it's not the greatest paper money I've ever seen. So what players are going to be doing is auctioning off different shares of the different stock in the different companies in the game, expanding track that goes along with the different stock, and the winner of the game is going to be the player with the most personal money at the end of the game, based on whatever triggers the end of the game. Whenever you auction off a particular share, you're actually going to pay money into that company's treasury, be able to spend money out of that company's treasury to then put rails out onto the board. So multiple players could own multiple shares of stocks, let's say in the yellow majestic line here, and both could spend money and use their rails, but then they're going to hopefully get dividends out of the different companies to add to their personal supply. And again, the most personal money is going to be the winner of the game. So the way the game is going to start is with an auction round. And so you're going to randomly determine a start player. He or she's going to pick one of the rails to auction. So let's say I'm the first player, and I'm going to say, let's auction off a share of Continental. So the minimum bid is $10. I can auction it off or pass, and then it's going to go around the table. If nobody bids on it, it's just going to get discarded, and then we're going to move on to the next company. So each company is going to have one share auctioned off, and then it's going to go around and around and around. And let's say I had somehow won a share of yellow for $15. I'll go ahead and put the $15 here in the little coffers there, and then I'll take a share of yellow, and then I'm going to place one of the starting rails out onto the board. In this case, these are cubes. And what you're going to do with that cube is actually place it in one of these cities. So you can choose any city you like on the board, and let's say I wanted to put it in Baltimore here. Now you can see there is an income amount that is going to happen here. So it can be $5 or $3, or if you're in Norfolk here, it can be 2 and 2. Philadelphia, you can see, is 6 and 4, and New York is 8 and 5. And what that means is the first company to get in there is going to get a little bump of the larger amount. So yellow's income is immediately going to go up $5. And so each company has a little marker here in their color, and they're going to move that up. In this case, yellow up to 5, and so on. And this will adjust throughout the game. I'll explain more how that's going to work. So once yellow has been auctioned off, and then I will pick another one, and I'll say green, and we'll auction that off. And then the winner of green will pick another one, and we'll go ahead and auction off each of the shares, one share of each, at the start of the game. Now in a 3-player game, you're going to randomly remove one of these particular rails from the game altogether, and there's 6, so you can just roll a d6 and then pick one and remove it. And that's also a very interesting little change. Now the other thing you're going to do when you win a share is, let's say I was the pink player and I was the first person to win a share in that little setup. I'm going to go ahead and put my marker there in the first spot, and then let's say orange comes along, they win the second share, and then purple, and then maybe orange again wins another one, and so on until we've auctioned those off. and then if there's still spaces left, then you're going to fill these in, basically going clockwise from whoever the start player was. It is possible to start the game off with no shares in any stock. And this is going to determine the player order for the first round. So a round actually is very, very simple. So we're going to go in this order, and I'm the pink player, and I can choose any of these possible actions. And let's say I choose to do this, and then orange comes here, and then purple goes down here, and then the beige color goes here, and let's say brown takes that. So we've all taken these actions, which I'll explain here in just a second. Now for the second phase of the turn, where we have reestablished the turn order. So brown's going to go here, and then orange here, and pink in there, so it may look something like that. And now we have a new turn order. We're going to go all the way around, do 3 sort of action rounds, at which point the stocks will pay dividends out of the bank, mind you. These will go directly to the player. And after we've done our 3 action rounds and paid our dividends, we're going to check and see if the end game has happened. We're going to see where the round marker's at. We're going to see if all of the stock here has been auctioned off. And we're also going to see if, depending on the player count, which sets of markers. So let's say we're playing a 3-player game. If the yellow markers, the red markers, and even the development markers here had been removed, that would trigger the end of the game. Or again, if this had already moved over to the far side of the board. Now, if none of that's happened, we still have some more turns to play, then we'll go ahead and move that marker to the next phase, and then we'll go back up here to our next phases of turns. So let's go over what the various actions are that you can do. Well, you might just go ahead and pass. If you really want to go first, maybe somebody has taken an action that you really wanted. For example, we have this one down here. This is to trigger an auction. You really wanted to do that. By going first, you can ensure that you do that in the following round. Now, the next action you can do here is actually put out one of these black development markers. And what you do is actually mark a town with that, and that's going to increase the income. But you can see in this case here in Baltimore, there's nothing to develop. It's already fully developed, so it's got a little line through it there. But let's say we were down here in Richmond. We'll go ahead and put that, and that is actually going to equal +2 if there's only one track in there. But if there's 2 different tracks, it's only going to add +1. And I'll explain that more in a second. But you basically are increasing the level of income there for anybody that's inside of that particular city. The next thing you might do is collect $5 right from the bank. Now, this next spot is going to change up kind of based on the player count. So you can either take $2 from the bank or make everybody else pay $2 to the bank. Or only in a 4 or 5 player game, you can expand 2-track for a company. And kind of continuing off of that, you can also expand 3-track if you take this action, or expand even 4-track here if you take that action. So what does it mean when you expand track? Well, if I had here a share in yellow, you have to have at least 1 share in a company to expand track, then I can pay to expand. So if I had taken the action to expand, let's say 4 spaces, I could do 1, 2, 3, and then a 4th space up here in Philadelphia. And you have to pay for that, and you're going to pay for that out of the company funds. Now you look and see the different terrain types noted here. The plain terrain here is going to be $2. Cities are going to be $2. Forest is going to be $3, and mountains are going to be $5. Now you can't ever share space in a forest or mountain area. There can only be 1 type of track here. But you can share space with other railroads in a plains or city space. But you're going to pay an extra $2 for each cube that is already there before you got there. So let's take again a look at adding these 4 rails here. So this is going to be $2 for this first spot, $2 for the city spot, plus another $2 for the cube that's already there. So we're up to $6. And then we're going to do another 2 here is 8, and then 10, and then another $2 for each of these cubes, so 12, 14. So you're going to pay $14 out of the company coffers here. Remember, I've got $15 in here. This is money that I put in there when I won the auction in the shares, or maybe other people have also bought yellow. So you're going to pay out of here and put whatever change back into here. Now, what's going to happen to company income as we expand into these cities? Well, let's say, we had this set up like before. Red was already in here, so they were getting a bonus of 5. Now that yellow has come in and now the city is now shared, yellow would get a bonus of 3, and then red's income from the city would go down to 3. So we'd actually reduce red by 2. Whereas we were up here in Philadelphia, since red and blue were already in there, they were both only getting 4, and then when yellow comes in here, they get 4. So the first side of income here is sort of your sole income if you're the only one in there, but as soon as somebody comes in there and shares it with you, you get reduced, and then everybody in there after only gets the quote-unquote shared or lower amount of income. Now the houses here, as I mentioned, they're going to add +2 if there's only one rail in there, but as soon as the second one comes in here, this gets reduced to +1. So if we look at this right now, yellow is getting 3 + 2, so they're getting 5. But as soon as somebody else were to come in here, this total would be reduced down to 3, so it's 2, and this actually becomes a 1. So now they'd both be getting +3. Red would get the 3 when they come in there, and then yellow would drop down 2. Now the final type of action that you can do, of course, is auction off a new share. Now whoever selects that action there is going to choose a new share to auction off, and it works just like the beginning of the game. Everything has a default or minimum value of $10, and we're going to go around. If nobody actually wants it, you just discard it out of the game. So it is possible to just auction something off, throw it up there, and then it gets discarded. Now there is one last piece of vital information that I need to share with you, and that is the connections for bonus cities. Now let's take a look. Now you can see there are 3 cities on the board that have this little rail marker here. You've got Atlanta, you've got Chicago way up here in the far northwest, and of course we have New York City over on the east coast. If you ever connect 2 of these rail cities together with a particular company, so let's say we had gotten white cubes all the way out here from Atlanta up to Chicago, then Atlanta, or excuse me, the white company is immediately going to get a bonus of 10 on the income track. Now if you also connect from Atlanta to New York, you'll get a bonus of 10. But the other interesting thing is if you ever connect all 3, then of course you're going to get a bonus of 30. So you can connect from Chicago to Atlanta, and then from Atlanta to New York, and by way of this long route here, you've actually connected, of course, Chicago through Atlanta to New York, so you get both bonuses. So you connected Chicago, Atlanta, Atlanta, New York, and then New York, Chicago, all the way through. So you can get a big beefy bonus there for connecting all of those. Now, as I said, as you run through the 3 action phases each turn, then you're going to have a dividend payout here at the end after those third sets of actions. And we'll just take a quick example how that works. We can see the various income here. I've just put them on random numbers. You're going to take the current value, so let's say red, we'll start with that. That's currently at 14. You're going to take and divide that by the number of shares and then pay players out in that amount. So let's say there had only been 1 red share auctioned off and I happen to own it, I would get $14. And let's say I got the second red share. There's only 2 red shares, and I own both of those, then I would also get the full amount. Now let's say though, Sparky, he decides to be a jerk, and he takes the second red share, and I've got 1. So now we're going to split this. So it's now 14 divided by 2. Now there are different, railroads here. Yellow here has 4 shares, so that could feasibly be divided 4 separate ways, or maybe I own 3 of them and you own 1 of them, and then so I basically get 3/4 and you get 1/4. So you're just going to quickly divide up wherever the current tracks are on the income, and divide it up by the number of shares, and then pay the players out directly to their personal supply. Again, this is going to come out of the bank, not from the railroads themselves. Okay, so what do I think of the game? Well, I think if you're familiar with a Winsome style game, this is going to seem like a slight tweak on, that particular kind of formula. So if you haven't played this style of game, I think this is a great entry level to that style of game for sure. Of course, it does remind me of Chicago Express. The map is virtually the same. In Chicago Express, you had a mechanism as opposed to this kind of worker placement, where you change up turn order based on what action you do. You had a similar mechanism with these dials that you would push up, but it's not likely or not going to happen very often in this case where somebody, you have 2 auctions in a row or anything like that. So there's that difference, and that is a slight difference. It's a slight change to sort of the dynamics of how this is going to work. It's a little bit less open to, I don't know how to say this, but like abuse, which makes it a little bit more accessible, I think, for newer players to sort of, get beat over the head too much when they're playing with experienced players in this style of game. This is probably plays better with 3 players, I think, than Chicago Express, because you do remove the share, and so you've got a little bit tighter of a board than you would with the 4th and 5th player. So that's also nice. I do like how you can pick your own starting cities. I haven't played a lot of these games. I played a handful. So the ones I'm thinking of are, of course, Chicago Express and German Railways, where you kind of are dictated your starting city. So I don't know which one I necessarily like better, but this is kind of a breath of fresh air because you kind of get to know how those companies behave in those particular games. Whereas this one, the companies are different because there's a different amount of shares and a different amount of available lines. You know, once you run out of the red cubes, that's it for the Red Liberty Railroad. But you can start it wherever you want. You can stick it off in the corner. You know, you can throw it up in the Northeast and grab a lot of sort of the you know, the cities there. You know, so that is a little bit interesting of an idea. You can, there's some room to kind of play around there and, you know, test things out and, you know, try different sort of combinations of things. You do have somewhere this sort of, you know, the emerging partnership kind of thing where, okay, hey, now we're both in the blue, so I'll help you, you know, with my, you know, my expand track action. I know you're going to help me with blue, unless you're going to run it into the ground and run it over to the side. So that seems like it's less harsh somehow in this particular game. And I've only played the game 4 times, so I haven't really explored it that much, and I haven't been too mean about it, frankly, because I tend to always be playing with new players. But so it does have some of those elements to it. And I think, like I said, at the end of the day, I think if you haven't played this style of game, this is definitely a good one to play, because it's very simple. You just, okay, I'm going to expand some track or auction, and, you know, and that's it. And then that's my turn, boom, boom, boom. And there's not a lot of overhead and, you know, complexity of something like an 18XX or anything, or even like a Steam. I mean, this is, you know, much lighter even in some ways than like a Steam or Railways of the World, if, you know, you want to go down that avenue of the train game. This is much more an auction game. It's much more, you got the kind of like poker aspect to it, where like, okay, I'm gonna see if I can drive up the price, you know, for them, so they overpay, so they don't, you know, the difference they get between what they paid and what they end up getting in the dividend round is, you know, not as good as it could be. So it's more about that than anything. So yeah, but it's a nice, light, good game, and I think it plays well at all the player counts, which is kind of a rarity in this style of game, which is really cool, because you can play this with 3, and I think it works pretty well. And of course, it plays really, really good at 4 and 5 players as well. So not a whole lot to say about this. I like the pieces and the components. It's got a different kind of sensibility with the Alexander Roche artwork, which is nice because it's kind of a break from your traditional winsome look. So that's kind of neat. But definitely, if you like this style of game, you know, a little bit hard to recommend if you really have played the heck out of Chicago Express, but it's got a nice twist on it. So it's almost like a little variant in a way, but it's more than a variant. So, but again, if you haven't played the style game, you know, and you're interested in it, then definitely go take a look at it. So thanks.